I'm Tyler Constable, one of the team members here at Avantra, and today we're talking about Rise with SAP, specifically for you, our managed service providers. As Rise with SAP is picking momentum and getting more and more steam, we're seeing a lot of our managed service providers wondering, how do we get involved? How do we get engaged with Rise environments, and where do we fit into this picture? So let's get into it a little bit. First off, it's important to note that there are two editions when it comes to Rise with SAP. There's the public cloud edition and the private cloud edition. When it comes to public cloud edition, think of it more as a traditional SaaS-based solution, where there are multiple customers that can enter their data into essentially one single system. Now, obviously, it's multi-tenant, but one single system. This really means there's not much they can do from a structural changes perspective. There's not a lot of customization they can do at that level, compared to the private cloud edition of Rise with SAP, where each customer is in their own dedicated environment, has their own dedicated network. And with that being said, they're able to make more structural changes than they would in, say, the public cloud edition. Really, when we think about Rise with SAP, a lot of the momentum that you're seeing right now is going to be around that private cloud edition. That's really what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you think about the technical stack, right, from a high level, we have at the bottom our hyperscaler, our infrastructure as a service. We have our operating system, database, and the SAP application layer. Now, when a customer selects to choose to go on to Rise with SAP, they're able to help select, where do they want, what hyperscalers do they want to use, what service integrators are they going to use to help with some of this consulting and project work and all of that. And really, the amount of work that SAP that they're signing up for really goes up into the SAP application layer. Think of it as going into client 000, but really nothing above that. So the other clients are really kind of left pretty open in all the work that needs to be done there. All right, so SAP, again, is going to be responsible for everything up into the SAP application layer, into that client 000. The customer is still responsible for everything above that. Right now, this doesn't display it correctly. It's not accurately represented here, but that's actually quite a lot of things that are still responsible on the customer's behalf. So the customer is still going to be responsible for things like IDOCs, monitoring and management of them, scheduling jobs, right? All the batch managements, making sure that the system is secure. So this could be like system change options. Is everything locked down? Client settings, also things like SAP Hot News are all of those security vulnerabilities in the SAP environment, transport management, user management. Now, what's important to note is that every time a customer signs up to be in Rise with SAP, they get this, it's about 50, 60, probably more than that now, page document of the breakdown of all the responsibilities of, is SAP responsible for it? Is the customer responsible for it? Right. So there's kind of a base level as to this is everything that SAP is going to do. Again, kind of going up in that triple client 0. But then there are other components and other things that they can purchase. So there could be additional services or things called CAS packages, which include some of these components. Right. So when you're first talking with your customer and they say they're going to be on Rise with SAP, it's important that you understand what additional services they have selected or what CAS packages they have selected if they have done so. Now, as for Avantra and how we fit into the picture to help you in these Rise with SAP environments, we are certified to run in Rise with SAP environments. So your team is able to use Avantra for both observability, for dashboarding, reporting purposes, management, and also automations. And I'll touch a little bit what those are in just a few minutes. Now, how this works is our agent will get deployed in a remote setting, right? So the agent is remote, can tie in to that customer network and go into those Rise with SAP environments at the application layer and the database layer. Now, if your customer has not yet gone onto Rise and are in negotiations, they can actually negotiate for third-party software to be put on the operating systems. In those situations, our agent can be deployed in those Rise with SAP environments, right? So it's going to depend if your customer has that agreement in place or not. And then that will also dictate a little bit more functionality if we're actually on the operating system. If not, that's fine. There's still a lot of things that still need to be managed and observed from their remote agent as well. As Avantra is starting to collect that observability data and doing some of the automations, that can all be tied into API calls. So that could be API calls to run automation, or it could be API calls outbound for things like ticketing, right? So we've got pre-built integrations into ServiceNow, not only for incident management, for CMDB data, event management, a lot of things from there, PagerDuty, Slack. If you're using any really third-party API that we can call, Avantra can push data. We've got open APIs to be able to do so. The managed service provider then also have dashboards available to them and reports. They can actually share login access into Avantra for their customers and limit the amount of access that they have, right? So maybe the customer can only run a report, or they want to show them a dashboard. All that can be done as well. So now the customer has a nice value add where they can now see anytime that they want how the performance of the RISE with SAP environment is done by what you set up in Avantra. So let's talk a little bit more about what is Avantra doing in these environments. So there's still a lot of monitoring elements that need to take place above client 000, right? So these are all the business functions that essentially are going to have the business run, right? So this is all the important stuff. The big one, iDocs, right? There needs to be good observability on iDocs, batch management, inbound, outbound queues, all these things that you would typically look at in an SAP environment, right? This is nothing new. Probably that's all the same stuff that you're probably providing to your customers right now that are on-premise or in a hyperscaler-based public cloud, right? So these are all still important things that unless if the customer has additional agreements with RISE with SAP, they're probably not being managed right now. They're probably not being looked at. There's also non-technical based checks, and these are things like user authorizations, client settings, right? So are the clients locked down, system and change options, those security vulnerabilities that SAP comes out with, right? Are those in place? Have they been entered in the system? Also third-party interfaces. Let's face it, a lot of customers that are going to move to RISE or have moved to RISE with SAP still are living in a hybrid world. There's still legacy systems on-premise, right? There's still things in a SaaS-based solution, right? So like Ariba, SuccessFactors, Concur. All of that stuff, you can now pull data from all of those, including RISE, on-premise, SaaS, bring them all into one Avantra system, and now you can help manage everything from one specific area. As for automations that are available in RISE with SAP via Avantra, end user maintenance, right? So creating of a user, modifying roles, things of that nature. Where this is really important is if your customer is using ServiceNow for, let's say, change management, they can actually run their change management through ServiceNow, initiate the automation to take place in Avantra, and actually run it through. So in this example, let's say there's an HR person that is hiring a new employee, right? And that HR person is in ServiceNow. They're saying, all right, I've got the badge, I've got the person's laptop. Now I need to create an SAP user for their specific role, right? Instead of sending that to the security team, they can now literally push a button. Avantra will take care of that whole process of doing that work as well. Basic job maintenance, right? So if a job failed, should it rerun? You want to automate that process? Things of that nature. Yeah, are the clients locked down? Are the hot news, is that in place? That analysis that needs to take place. That's a lot of work for managed service providers, right? Especially if they have customers or they're managing large environments, or they have a lot of customers all under one person's belt. That's a lot to go through and look at every single system every time a new vulnerability note comes out from SAP. So monthly or even more frequently, Avantra can tell you automatically which systems, which notes are applicable for. SSL certificate management. As we all know, if a certificate goes down while SAP is up, that could essentially be a production down environment, right? There's no communication happening between certain business processes. Being able to automate those certificates is very key. And lastly, we are a platform. So you can actually build out whatever automation you want in those environments, right? So maybe your customer has some very specific needs and uniquenesses. You can actually build that out for your customers specifically in those environments. If you have any other questions or things you would like to see or like to have a further discussion around RISE with SAP and using Avantra to help in those environments, please reach out to us at www.avantra.com, and we look forward to those conversations. Thank you.